I need to warn you about this story. Every other story I've told on this channel ends with Bruce Lee standing over a bodyguard who just learned what speed means. Standing across from a movie star who just learned what seeing means. Standing in the place where a 300-pound wrestler used to be standing 8 seconds earlier, before the floor introduced itself. Standing on a television stage while 70 million people tried to process what their eyes had just failed to capture. Every story, the same ending. Bruce Lee, standing. The other person, reconsidering their assumptions. This story doesn't end that way. Not because Bruce Lee lost a fight. Bruce Lee never lost a fight. Not in any story I've been able to verify, not in any credible account from any source I trust, not once, not ever. But there was one opponent he couldn't beat. One opponent that didn't care about his speed, didn't care about his precision, didn't care about the 15 years of engineering he'd built into every movement his body could make. An opponent that couldn't be read, couldn't be intercepted, couldn't be outmaneuvered. An opponent that was already inside the walls, already past the defenses, already winning by the time anyone noticed the fight had started. In July of 1973, that opponent was winning. And almost nobody knew. This is not an exciting story. I want to tell you that up front, because you've earned honesty from me over the course of these videos, and the honest thing is to prepare you. Nobody gets thrown across a room. Nobody hits the floor in 8 seconds. There are no gasps from studio audiences, no legendary sparring sessions, no frame-by-frame analyses of techniques too fast for the human eye. This is a quiet story. It happens in the spaces between takes on a film set in Hong Kong. It happens in the peripheral vision of one man who was standing close enough to see something that nobody else could see. It happens in 1.5 seconds. 1.5 seconds. That's the number for this story. Not 8. Not 3 frames. 1.5 seconds of a face that the cameras didn't capture, that the audience never saw, that the legend never absorbed. 1.5 seconds that one person witnessed and carried, and has never been able to put down. Hong Kong made Bruce Lee a god. That's not hyperbole. That's the literal emotional reality of what happened when a man who couldn't get a leading role in American television went home, made 4 films in 3 years, and became the biggest movie star on the continent. The Big Boss. Fist of Fury. Way of the Dragon. Enter the Dragon, finished but not yet released, sitting in cans in a studio vault, waiting to be unleashed on the world. For films that didn't just make Bruce famous, they reorganized the gravity of popular culture in Asia and, eventually, globally. Before Bruce, there were action stars. After Bruce, there was Bruce, and then there was everyone else, and the distance between them was not a gap but a canyon. Hong Kong gave Bruce everything that America wouldn't. The center of the frame. The name above the title. The right to be the hero of his own story, filmed in his own language, for an audience that saw his face and saw themselves. The choice he'd made on that airplane, the choice between being seen and being understood, had paid off beyond any reasonable expectation. He was seen. He was understood. He was worshipped. But gods aren't supposed to bleed. And in his last week, Bruce Lee was bleeding. Every story on this channel has been told through the eyes of someone who encountered Bruce Lee. A bodyguard who learned about speed. A movie star who learned about perception. A karate champion who learned about the cost of certainty. A boxer who watched from a dark room. A wrestler whose laughter died. This is the same structure. One more observer. One more pair of eyes. But this observer didn't see a fight. He didn't see a demonstration. He didn't see the Bruce Lee that exists on posters and in highlight reels and in the memories of people who met him at his best. He saw 1.5 seconds of truth. And those 1.5 seconds have haunted him for 50 years. He was standing 3 feet away. Nobody else was that close. Nobody else was looking. And in the moment when Bruce turned away from the camera, 1.5 seconds of turning, the span of a single breath, the man standing 3 feet away saw Bruce Lee's real face. Not the face on the posters. Not the face on the screen. The face underneath. The one that the legend was built to hide. 6 days later, Bruce Lee was dead. And the first thing the stuntman thought, the very first thing, before grief, before shock, before the wave of disbelief that would drown Hong Kong and then the world, was this: I saw it. I saw it and I said nothing. Let me take you to the set. Hong Kong, July 1973. The heat is the first thing you need to understand, because the heat is a character in this story the way it's a character in every story set in Hong Kong in summer. 92 degrees Fahrenheit. 93% humidity. The air doesn't move. It sits on you like a wet towel draped over a warm body. It fills your lungs with a thickness that makes breathing feel like drinking. Your clothes are wet within 5 minutes of stepping outside. Your skin generates a film of moisture that never fully evaporates because the air is already saturated and has no capacity to absorb more. Everything is damp. Everything is heavy. The city itself seems to sweat. The film set is outdoors. Golden Harvest Studios, or a location nearby, the specific location is less important than the physical reality of what it feels like to work on an outdoor film set in Hong Kong in July. Diesel generators humming in the background, powering the lights and the cameras and the fans that blow on the equipment to prevent overheating but which never seem to be pointed at the humans. The smell is specific and unforgettable if you've ever been on a set like this: diesel exhaust, hairspray, cigarette smoke, the sharp chemical tang of theatrical makeup melting in the heat, and underneath all of that, the universal human smell of sweat. Everyone is sweating. The director is sweating. The camera operators are sweating. The grips are sweating. The actors are sweating. The stuntmen, in their padded costumes, are swimming. The sound, the director's voice through a megaphone, alternately patient and barking, the rhythm of a man who has been doing this long enough that his frustration has become a performance of its own. The clap of the clapperboard marking each take. The thuds and grunts of choreographed combat, bodies hitting pads, feet hitting mats, the meaty percussion of a martial arts film being manufactured one impact at a time. Crew members shouting in Cantonese. The distant noise of Hong Kong traffic beyond the set perimeter, a constant low rumble that you stop hearing after the first hour and that reasserts itself every time the set goes quiet. The hierarchy on a Hong Kong film set in this era is strict, unspoken, and absolute. The star is at the top. Not the director, the star. In Hollywood, the director is God. In Hong Kong action cinema, the star is God, because the star is what sells tickets, and what sells tickets is what keeps the studio lights on, and what keeps the studio lights on is the only thing that matters. Below the star, the director. Below the director, the senior crew. Below the senior crew, the junior crew. Below the junior crew, the extras. And below the extras, occupying the lowest rung of the professional ladder, doing the most physically demanding and least financially rewarded work on the set, the stuntmen. Stuntmen in Hong Kong cinema are the disposable bodies. The human special effects. They are the men who attack the star in choreographed waves and get kicked and punched and thrown and dropped, take after take, until the director has what he needs. They absorb the impacts that the star delivers. They sell the reactions that make the star's techniques look devastating. They fall down for a living, and they do it without complaint, because the line of young men who want their job stretches around the block and down the street and into the next neighborhood. They don't speak to the star unless spoken to. They don't offer opinions. They don't approach. They do their job, they collect their pay, and they go home. This isn't cruelty. It's order. A film set with 30 stuntmen and a star who is also the fight choreographer and also the most famous person in the country cannot function if the hierarchy breaks down. Everyone knows their place. Everyone stays in it. The stuntman in this story, and I'm going to call him that, the stuntman, because his name matters less than what he witnessed and because the specificity of his identity would distract from the universality of what he saw, is in his late 20s. He's been doing stunt work for 3 years. By Hong Kong standards, that makes him experienced. Not senior, not legendary, but seasoned enough that the coordinators trust him with the more demanding gags. He's trained in traditional Chinese martial arts and in the specific discipline of film fighting, which is related to real fighting the way architecture is related to engineering, same principles, different application. He can take a hit. He can sell a reaction. He can fall from a standing position without injury, which sounds simple and is not. He can fall from a platform. He can roll. He can absorb a kick to a chest pad and fly backward 4 feet and land on a mat and lie still and make it look like the kick just destroyed him, when in fact the kick was controlled and the flight was assisted and the landing was calculated, and the whole thing is a collaboration between two professionals who have rehearsed the sequence and trust each other's precision. That trust is important. When a stuntman receives a kick from an action star, the stuntman's safety depends entirely on the star's control. A kick that's 3 inches too high hits the neck instead of the chest pad. A kick that's 20% too hard breaks a rib instead of pushing a body. The margin between a safe take and a hospital visit is measured in inches and percentages, and the stuntman must trust, absolutely, that the star will hit the mark every time. With most action stars, that trust is conditional. Most stars are good. Some are very good. But all of them, occasionally, miss. The kick drifts. The punch lands heavy. The timing slips. Stuntmen know this. They build a margin of safety into their own positioning, a slight adjustment of distance or angle that gives them a buffer in case the star's control isn't perfect. With Bruce, there is no buffer. There doesn't need to be. Bruce Lee's control is absolute. The stuntman has been on this set for several days, and in that time, he has watched Bruce deliver hundreds of techniques to dozens of stuntmen, and not once has a kick drifted, not once has a punch landed heavy, not once has the timing slipped by a fraction of a second. Bruce operates in a space of precision so narrow that the concept of a margin of safety is almost irrelevant. The kick goes exactly where it's supposed to go, at exactly the force it's supposed to carry, every time. The stuntman has never seen anything like it. Nobody on this set has ever seen anything like it. It is, by any professional standard the stuntman can apply, perfect. This is what normal Bruce looks like on set. This is the baseline. And I'm establishing it carefully, because everything that follows depends on you understanding what normal looks like, so that when normal changes, you feel the change the way the stuntman felt it. Normal Bruce between takes, energy. Restless, focused, alive energy. He doesn't sit down. He doesn't rest. He practices. While the crew resets the cameras, while the director reviews the last take, while the lighting team adjusts a reflector, Bruce is in the corner of the set, repeating a movement. The same kick, 30 times. The same entry, 30 times. Not because he needs the practice. Because perfection, for Bruce, is not a destination, it's a maintenance project. It requires constant upkeep. The body forgets. The timing drifts. The only way to keep the machine at peak output is to run it, constantly, even in the spaces between the spaces. Normal Bruce's eyes, scanning. Always scanning. Reading the set the way he reads opponents, cataloging positions, tracking movements. Processing information at a speed that makes you feel, if you're standing near him, like you're being photographed by something that sees more than a camera should. The stuntman has gotten used to this. It took a day or two. At first, being near Bruce felt like standing in a searchlight. After a few days, it became normal. Intense, but normal. Normal Bruce's body, still. Controlled. A body so thoroughly mastered that it doesn't make unnecessary movements. No fidgeting. No restless shifting of weight. No unconscious gestures. Everything Bruce's body does, it does on purpose. The stillness between movements is as controlled as the movements themselves. His balance, in particular, is something the stuntman has noticed and filed away in the part of his professional memory reserved for things he will never be able to replicate. Bruce's balance is not human balance. It's something else. A gyroscope. A thing that doesn't wobble, doesn't shift, doesn't waver. A center of gravity so precisely maintained that you could push him and he would absorb the push without moving, the way a mountain absorbs rain. That's normal. That's the baseline. That's what the stuntman has been watching for days, from 3 feet away, with the professional attention of a man whose body depends on understanding the body in front of him. Today is not normal. The stuntman notices the first thing between takes, standing near the water station, maybe 6 feet from Bruce. The sweat. Everybody sweats in Hong Kong July. The stuntman is sweating. The crew is sweating. The extras are sweating. Sweat is the default state of every human being on this set. But the stuntman has been on sets in this heat for 3 years, and he knows what normal Hong Kong July sweat looks like. It looks like a sheen. A gloss. A layer of moisture that sits on the skin and darkens the collar and makes you reach for a towel between takes. It's constant, it's uncomfortable, and it's universal. Bruce's sweat is different. Not in kind, in degree. Not a sheen. Rivers. The moisture is running off him in visible streams. His clothing, the yellow tracksuit or whatever costume he's wearing for the scene, is dark with saturation, not just at the collar but across the chest, down the sleeves, down the back. His hair, which Bruce normally keeps controlled with meticulous attention because his hair is part of his on-screen image and he cares about his on-screen image with the same precision he brings to everything else, his hair is plastered to his forehead. Flattened. Wet. And the disproportionality is the part that catches the stuntman's attention. Bruce hasn't done anything strenuous in the last 10 minutes. The last take was 12 minutes ago. He's been standing, drinking water, occasionally practicing a movement but nothing explosive, nothing that would generate this volume of perspiration. The sweat is not proportional to the work. His body is producing sweat at a rate that suggests a level of internal exertion that doesn't match the external activity. The stuntman notices. He doesn't say anything. He files it. The second thing. The eyes. Bruce's eyes are famous for a reason. They're described by everyone who encountered him in person, students, colleagues, friends, adversaries, with variations on the same theme. Alive. Intense. Penetrating. The eyes of a man who sees more than you want him to see. The stuntman has spent days acclimating to those eyes and has reached a professional peace with their intensity. Today, the eyes are different. Still intense. But interrupted. The stuntman, standing 3 feet away and looking at Bruce's face during a pause in conversation between Bruce and the fight coordinator, sees something that lasts less than a second. A flicker. A micro moment of unfocus. Bruce's eyes, which are always locked on something, always processing, always reading, Bruce's eyes go briefly, almost imperceptibly, nowhere. They don't close. They don't drift to another object. They simply stop seeing. For a fraction of a second, the lights are on and nobody's home. Then the lights come back. The focus returns. Bruce is Bruce again. The stuntman watches for it and sees it happen 2 more times in the next 5 minutes. Each time, less than a second. Each time, the same pattern, focus, absence, return. As if a switch is being flipped off and then immediately back on. Somebody standing 10 feet away would never catch it. The stuntman is 3 feet away. The third thing. The hand. Bruce's left hand moves to his left temple. Not dramatically. Not the way an actor clutches his head in a scene about headaches. Subtly. A brush. A press. The fingertips making contact with the skin just above the ear, pressing briefly, then withdrawing. The gesture is so small, so controlled, so deliberately minimized that it could be anything. An itch. A bead of sweat being wiped away. A habitual touch that means nothing. The stuntman watches it happen 4 times in 10 minutes. 4 times. Once every 2.5 minutes. A rhythm. A pulse. The regularity of it is what transforms it, in the stuntman's mind, from a meaningless gesture into a signal. Random touches don't have a rhythm. Pain has a rhythm. Pain comes in waves, and when it does, the body responds to each wave with the same motion, the same hand, the same location, the same brief press of fingers against skin, as if the pressure from outside could counterbalance the pressure from inside. 4 times in 10 minutes. The stuntman counts without meaning to. His brain registers the pattern before his conscious mind decides to track it. The fourth thing. The balance. Bruce Lee has the best balance of any human being the stuntman has ever seen. This is not an opinion. It's a professional assessment from a man whose career depends on understanding balance, his own and others. Bruce's balance is a constant, the way the North Star is a constant. It doesn't change. It doesn't vary with fatigue or heat or mood or time of day. It is always, in every context the stuntman has observed, perfect. Today, between takes, Bruce shifts his weight. Twice in 5 minutes. Tiny corrections. Almost invisible. Not the dramatic sway of a dizzy person. Not the obvious instability of someone who's about to fall. Just adjustments. Micro movements of the feet and hips that redistribute weight from one side to the other, the kind of adjustments that a human body makes automatically when its vestibular system sends a signal that says your center isn't where you think it is. These adjustments are normal for normal people. Everyone makes them. Everyone wobbles. But Bruce doesn't wobble. Bruce has never wobbled, not in the days the stuntman has been watching him. Bruce's center of gravity is so precisely maintained that these micro-corrections are as visible, to someone who knows what Bruce's balance normally looks like, as a crack in a marble floor. The gyroscope has developed a wobble. Faint. Intermittent. Still functional by any ordinary standard. Still remarkable by any ordinary standard. But the stuntman doesn't measure Bruce by ordinary standards. He measures Bruce by Bruce's standards. And by Bruce's standards, something is wrong. 4 signs. Sweat. Eyes. Hand. Balance. None visible on camera. None visible from 10 feet away. None visible to anyone who hasn't spent days at 3-foot distance, watching this particular body with professional attention, learning its rhythms and its norms and its particular vocabulary of physical expression. The stuntman sees them because proximity plus time plus professional observation equals seeing what others can't. The formula that made Bruce great, the ability to see what's hidden in another person's body, has been reversed. The stuntman is reading Bruce the way Bruce reads opponents. And what he's reading is damage. He doesn't know the medical vocabulary for what he's seeing. He doesn't know that the disproportionate sweating is consistent with autonomic nervous system dysregulation. Doesn't know that the micro-absences in the eyes are consistent with brief episodes of altered consciousness. Doesn't know that the hand on the temple is the body's attempt to manage intracranial pressure. Doesn't know that the balance disruption suggests vestibular involvement. Doesn't know that all of these things, together, form a clinical picture that would have alarmed any neurologist who saw it. He doesn't know any of that. He's a stuntman. He doesn't know that 2 months ago, on May 10th, Bruce Lee collapsed during a dialogue dubbing session at Golden Harvest Studios and was rushed to a hospital where doctors diagnosed cerebral edema, swelling of the brain, and treated him and released him and told him to rest, and that Bruce Lee acknowledged the diagnosis and ignored the advice, because Bruce Lee did not rest, because resting was not in the architecture of the man, because the gap between what his body needed and what his will demanded had always been resolved in favor of the will, every time, without exception, for his entire life. The stuntman doesn't know any of that. He just knows that the most perfect physical machine he's ever seen is showing signs of imperfection, and the signs are small enough that nobody else has noticed, and his professional instincts are telling him that something is wrong, and his professional position is telling him that there is absolutely nothing he can do about it. He says nothing. The day continues. The heat continues. The work continues. The director calls for the next setup. The stuntmen take their positions. The choreography is reviewed. Each man knows his mark, his timing, his angle of approach, his fall. The stuntman's assignment for this take is specific and rehearsed. He will attack Bruce from the right side. Bruce will execute a spinning back kick. The kick will connect with the stuntman's chest pad. The stuntman will fly backward, hit the ground, stay down. Simple. Clean. A gag he's performed dozens of times with other action stars and several times already with Bruce on this shoot. He takes his position. The other stuntmen take theirs, 5, 6 of them, arrayed around the set in the choreographed pattern that will create the illusion of a coordinated attack and the reality of sequential destruction. Each one will approach. Each one will fall. Bruce will stand in the center and dispatch them with the efficiency and precision that his audience expects, that his reputation demands, that his body has always delivered. The clapperboard claps. The director calls action. The stuntmen attack. The sequence begins. Bruce performs. And here is what haunts the stuntman more than anything else in the 50 years since this day. More than the sweat. More than the eyes. More than the hand on the temple. More than any of the signs he noticed between takes. Bruce is still perfect. When the camera rolls, the switch flips. Whatever is happening inside Bruce Lee's body, whatever the sweat means, whatever the eyes mean, whatever the wobble in the gyroscope means, it does not reach the surface. The kicks are fast. Not diminished. Not compensated. Fast. The same speed the stuntman has been watching for days, the speed that makes you question your own perception, the speed that exists in the gap between what the eye can track and what the brain can process. The strikes are precise. The same precision. The same inhuman accuracy that puts every technique exactly where it needs to be, at exactly the force it needs to carry, with exactly the timing that makes the choreography look like chaos and the chaos look like inevitability. The movements are fluid. Connected. Each one flowing into the next with the seamless continuity that is Bruce's signature, the physical expression of a martial philosophy that says there are no isolated techniques, only a continuous stream of motion that adapts to each moment as it arrives. Perfect. Flawless. Bruce Lee. The stuntman, watching the first three stuntmen attack and fall, recognizes what he's seeing with a clarity that will take years to articulate. He is watching a man override his own body. He is watching will defeat flesh. He is watching the most disciplined human being he has ever encountered refuse, absolutely and completely, to allow his internal state to affect his external output. The camera demands perfection. Bruce delivers perfection. The cost of that perfection is paid somewhere invisible, somewhere the lens can't reach, in a currency that the audience will never see on the invoice. He has worked with dozens of action stars. When they're tired, you see it. The timing gets sloppy. The kicks lose height. The strikes land approximate instead of precise. The body's limitations assert themselves, inevitably, because bodies have limitations and the camera eventually reveals them. With Bruce, nothing. The camera sees what Bruce wants it to see. Nothing more. Nothing less. The stuntman's turn. He attacks from the right, exactly as choreographed. Bruce sees him coming, of course Bruce sees him coming. Bruce has always seen everything coming, and the spinning back kick begins. Bruce's body rotates. The rear leg whips around. The foot makes contact with the stuntman's chest pad. And even through the pad, a pad specifically designed to absorb and distribute impact, a pad that has taken hundreds of kicks from dozens of martial artists over its service life, the stuntman feels the force. Not as pain. As information. His professional body, trained over 3 years to read the language of impact, receives the data and reports its findings. This is not a sick man's kick. This is not a diminished kick. This is not a kick from a body that is sweating disproportionately, that is flickering in and out of focus, that is pressing its hand to its temple every 2.5 minutes, that is wobbling for the first time in its life. This is a kick that could break ribs. This kick could hospitalize him if the pad weren't there. Whatever is failing inside Bruce Lee's body, the part that generates force has not yet surrendered. The engine is damaged, but it's still producing full power. The stuntman flies backward. This is choreographed and also real. The kick provides genuine propulsion, and the stuntman's job is to ride that propulsion into the planned fall. He hits the ground. The mat absorbs the landing. He stays down. His job is done. The scene continues around him, other stuntmen attacking, other stuntmen falling, but his part is over. He lies on his back, looking up at the sky, the hot bright Hong Kong sky, white with humidity, glaring. And from the ground, at this angle, he has a sightline that nobody else on the set has. He can see Bruce from below. From behind the camera line. At an angle that no lens covers. Bruce is completing the rotation from the spinning back kick, and the rotation takes him through a position where his face is turned away from every camera on the set. Not by design, by geometry. The spin carries his body through 360 degrees, and during approximately 1.5 seconds of that rotation, his face points toward a part of the set that contains no cameras, no crew, no observers. No observers except one. The stuntman, on his back, looking up, is in the one position on the set that has a clear view of Bruce Lee's face during the 1.5 seconds when that face is not performing for anyone. The mask drops. The stuntman sees Bruce's face in profile. Unguarded. Unperformed. The face of a man who believes, for 1.5 seconds, that nobody is watching. Eyes squeezed shut. Not the dramatic squint of a movie fighter selling effort. Not the focused compression of a martial artist channeling force. The involuntary, desperate clench of a man in genuine pain. The eyelids pressed together so hard that the muscles around the eyes contract visibly, pulling the skin into furrows that don't exist on the face the cameras see. Jaw clenched. Not the photogenic tension of an action star's jaw. Clenched the way a jaw clenches when the body is trying to contain something that wants to escape. When the pain is sharp enough that the body's automatic response is to bite down, to lock the teeth together, to create a physical seal that prevents the sound from getting out. And the hand. The left hand. The same hand that has been pressing against the temple every 2.5 minutes between takes, the hand spasms. Not the controlled, subtle brush the stuntman saw earlier. A spasm. The hand jerks toward the temple on its own, involuntarily, the body's emergency response overriding the will's standing orders. For a fraction of a second, the hand is moving toward the pain without permission. Then Bruce catches it. The will reasserts itself. The hand stops. Reverses. Returns to his side. Forced down. Held down. The will winning the fight against the body's reflexes through sheer, grinding, furious discipline. 1.5 seconds. The entire sequence eyes, jaw, hand, recovery takes 1.5 seconds. Then Bruce turns back to the camera. And the mask is back. The eyes open. The jaw relaxes. The hand is still. The face on the posters, the face on the screen, the face that Hong Kong worships and that the world is about to discover when Enter the Dragon opens in 3 weeks, that face, intact, immaculate, performing. Bruce Lee. Not the man. The product. The legend. The god that Hong Kong built and that 1.5 seconds of unguarded truth just revealed to be a man. A man in pain. Hiding it from everyone. Choosing perfection despite the cost. Delivering to the camera exactly what the camera demands while something inside him is screaming, and the scream is audible only in the 1.5 seconds when no lens is pointing at his face. One person saw it. One person, lying on a mat, looking up from an angle that the choreography never intended to be an observation point, saw Bruce Lee's real face. The stuntman lies on the mat. He does not move. His job requires him to stay down until the director calls cut. So he stays down. And he looks at the sky. And the image of what he just saw, 1.5 seconds of it, begins the process of burning itself into his memory with the permanence of a brand on skin. 1.5 seconds. The length of a breath. The time it takes to blink twice. The duration of a single heartbeat, or maybe 2. In 1.5 seconds, a human face can say everything it's been holding back, if it believes no one is listening. In 1.5 seconds, the distance between a legend and a man can become visible if you're in the right place, at the right angle, at the right moment, and if you have spent enough time at 3-foot distance to know the difference between the face that performs and the face that exists underneath the performance. The director calls cut. The stuntman gets up. Brushes himself off. Returns to the holding area where stuntmen wait between setups. He sits on a folding chair. Someone hands him water. He drinks it. The heat presses on him from all sides. The set continues its work around him. He says nothing. He says nothing because you don't tell Bruce Lee he looks sick. You just don't. The hierarchy of a Hong Kong film set does not include a channel through which a stuntman communicates concern about the star's health. That channel doesn't exist. The stuntman is at the bottom of the ladder. Bruce is at the top. The distance between them is not measured in feet but in status, in authority, in the implicit understanding that the star's body is the star's business and everyone else's job is to show up, do their work, and go home. He says nothing because he's not sure what he saw. 1.5 seconds. From the ground. At an angle. Through the haze of Hong Kong heat and the physical aftereffect of taking a spinning back kick to the chest. Maybe he imagined it. Maybe the pain on Bruce's face was just the effort of the kick. Spinning back kicks are physically demanding, and even for Bruce, even at the highest level, the exertion might produce a grimace that could be mistaken for pain. Maybe the hand was reaching for sweat, not for the temple. Maybe the jaw was clenched from effort, not from agony. Maybe. The word maybe is the trapdoor through which an action escapes. He says nothing because everyone around Bruce is acting normal. The director hasn't stopped filming. The fight coordinator hasn't pulled Bruce aside. The producers haven't called a meeting. The other stuntmen, who have been on set as long as he has, don't seem concerned. If something were seriously wrong with the biggest movie star in Asia, on the set of his own film, surrounded by people whose livelihoods depend on his ability to perform, if something were seriously wrong, someone more important than a stuntman would have noticed. Someone with authority would have acted. The fact that nobody is acting means either nothing is wrong or the people with the power to act have decided to pretend nothing is wrong. And in either case, a stuntman's voice is not the voice that changes the outcome. He says nothing because of the universal logic of the bystander. The logic that says, if I'm the only one seeing this, I'm probably wrong. And if I'm wrong and I speak up, the consequences are mine. Embarrassment. Overstepping. The arrogance of a stuntman presuming to diagnose a star. But if I'm right and I stay quiet, the consequences are whose? Not mine. That's the logic. That's the trapdoor. The consequences belong to someone else. To Bruce. To the doctors. To the people with authority and access and the professionals standing to say something that will be heard. The consequences are theirs. Not mine. The stuntman finishes the day. Goes home. The bus or the walk or whatever conveyance carries him from the set to his apartment in whatever part of Hong Kong he lives in. He eats dinner. He showers. The hot water mixes with the residual sweat of the day and runs down the drain and takes with it the physical evidence of 8 hours on a film set in July. He goes to bed. He does not sleep immediately. The image is there. 1.5 seconds of it. Playing behind his closed eyelids with the clarity that recent memory has before time softens it. The eyes squeezed shut. The jaw clenched. The hands spasming. Then the mask, back on, perfect, as if nothing had happened. He sleeps. He wakes up. The next day arrives. And the next. The days of July accumulating in the specific, indifferent way that days do when they don't know what they're counting down to. 6 days. 6 ordinary days. Hong Kong in July. Heat. Humidity. The daily machinery of a city that doesn't know it's about to lose the most famous person in it. The stuntman goes about his life. Maybe he works. Maybe he has a day off. The details don't exist in any record I've been able to find. They're just days. Normal, forgettable, unremarkable days that acquire their meaning only in retrospect, only after the thing they were counting down to actually happens, only after the number 6 attaches itself to them and transforms them from ordinary days into the last days. July 20, 1973. Bruce Lee died on July 20, 1973. Cerebral edema. Swelling of the brain. The same condition that had hospitalized him 2 months earlier, on May 10, when he collapsed during a dubbing session and was rushed to a hospital where doctors treated the swelling and released him and told him to rest. He was 32 years old. I'm going to say that again, because the simplicity of it deserves repetition, and because the facts, stated plainly, carry more weight than any dramatic rendering I could construct around them. Bruce Lee died on July 20, 1973. Cerebral edema. He was 32 years old. That's it. That's the fact. I'm not going to dramatize it. I'm not going to describe the phone calls or the ambulance or the hospital or the faces of the people who received the news. Other people have told that story, and they've told it well, and it's not mine to tell again. The fact is enough. The date is enough. The age is enough. 32. The age at which most people are just beginning to understand what they're capable of. The age at which Bruce Lee, who had understood what he was capable of since he was a teenager and had spent every year since then expanding the definition, stopped. The stuntman heard the news. I don't know how. Phone call, probably. Or the radio. Or a colleague showing up at his door with the look on his face that tells you what happened before the words do. The mechanism doesn't matter. The news arrived the way it arrived for everyone in Hong Kong that day, as a shockwave, as an impossibility, as a sentence that the brain receives and refuses to process because the information it contains is incompatible with the operating model of the world. Bruce Lee is dead. The words make grammatical sense but experiential nonsense. Bruce Lee cannot be dead. Bruce Lee is the most alive person anyone has ever seen. Bruce Lee is speed and force and precision and will. Bruce Lee is the man whose body operates at a level that cameras can barely capture and that human perception cannot track. Bruce Lee is the man who, 6 days ago, delivered a spinning back kick with enough force to break ribs, through a chest pad, while his brain was swelling inside his skull. That man cannot be dead. Death is for people whose bodies give up, and Bruce Lee's body never gave up. It never gave an inch. Not on camera, not in a fight, not in training, not ever. But the body doesn't negotiate. The body doesn't care about will. The body has its own mathematics, and the mathematics are final, and on July 20, 1973, the mathematics reached their conclusion, and the conclusion was cerebral edema, and the edema was fatal, and the most extraordinary physical machine of the 20th century shut down at the age of 32. The stuntman heard the news. And the first thing he thought, the very first thing, before the grief arrived, before the shock settled, before the collective convulsion that Hong Kong and then Asia and then the world would undergo in the hours and days and weeks that followed, the very first thing was not a feeling. It was an image. 1.5 seconds. Eyes squeezed shut. Jaw clenched. Hands spasming toward the temple. Then the mask, back on. Perfect. I saw it. I saw it and I said nothing. That thought arrived before the grief. Before everything. It arrived with the speed and force of something that had been waiting behind a door, pressing against the lock, and the news of Bruce's death was the key that opened it. The image flooded in. 1.5 seconds of it, as vivid as the moment it was recorded, more vivid than the 6 ordinary days that separated the recording from this moment of playback. The days were already fading. The 1.5 seconds were not fading. They were sharpening. And now I need to talk about what the stuntman carried. Not for a day. Not for a week. For 50 years. It wasn't guilt. Not exactly. That's the word people reach for when they hear this story, and it's the wrong word, or at least an incomplete one. Guilt implies that you could have done something and chose not to. The stuntman's rational mind knows, has always known, from the first moment of the first day of carrying this, that he could not have done anything. He was a stuntman. He was not a doctor. He had no authority, no access, no standing, no mechanism by which his observation could have reached someone with the power to act on it. Even if he had found the courage to approach Bruce Lee directly, to walk up to the biggest movie star in Asia, in violation of every protocol and hierarchy that governed his professional existence, and say the words, "I saw your face, I saw the pain, something is wrong," what would have happened? Bruce would have dismissed it. Politely, probably. With the warmth that people who knew him consistently describe. Maybe with a joke. Maybe with a brief, reassuring explanation, just a headache, the heat, nothing serious. And then the conversation would have ended, and Bruce would have gone back to the set, and the stuntman would have gone back to the holding area, and the next take would have been called, and the kicks would have been fast, and the strikes would have been precise, and the performance would have been flawless, because that's what Bruce did. He performed. He overrode. He refused to allow his internal state to affect his external output, and no stuntman's concern, however sincere, was going to change that equation. The stuntman knows this. Has always known it. The rational calculus is clear. There was nothing he could have done. Nothing he could have said. Nothing that would have changed the outcome. Bruce Lee died of cerebral edema, and the edema was the result of physiological processes that were underway long before the stuntman saw those 1.5 seconds, and no conversation on a film set between a stuntman and a star was going to reverse those processes or alter their trajectory. And yet, the image doesn't care about rational calculus. The image has its own logic, its own persistence, its own immune system that defeats every attempt to neutralize it with reason. The stuntman can tell himself 1,000 times that there was nothing he could have done. The image doesn't hear him. The image plays when it wants to play. In the shower. Driving alone. Lying in bed at night when the mind wanders into rooms it's been told to stay out of. The image arrives on its own schedule, without invitation, without permission, and it always arrives complete, all 1.5 seconds of it, every detail intact, the resolution never degrading no matter how many years pass between the recording and the playback. Eyes squeezed shut. Jaw clenched. Hands spasming. Mask back on. How long has he been hiding it? That question. The stuntman's question. Not how long has he been sick, not what's wrong with him, not why doesn't someone do something, but how long has he been hiding it? Because that's the part that haunts. Not the illness. The concealment. The act of will by which a man in pain presents himself to the world as a man without pain. The energy that concealment requires. The discipline it demands. The loneliness of it, carrying something that heavy, that close to the surface, that obvious to anyone standing 3 feet away with the right eyes, and choosing, every moment of every day, to carry it alone. How many takes? How many days? How many years has this man been in pain and choosing to be perfect anyway? The stuntman tells this story rarely. In 50 years, he has told it a handful of times. Not to journalists. Not to biographers. Not to the makers of the countless documentaries that have been produced about Bruce Lee's life and death. He tells it to people he trusts, in private settings, usually late at night, usually after the kind of silence that precedes the opening of a door that's been locked for a long time. When he tells it, he pauses at the same moment every time. The 1.5 seconds. He describes them with the same words, in the same order, with the same pauses between phrases, as if the words have been carved into stone and he's reading them off the surface. Not because he's rehearsed. Because some memories are stored at a depth that bypasses the normal mechanisms of recall. They don't degrade. They don't simplify. They don't acquire the soft edges that most memories acquire over time. They play back with the fidelity of a recording, every detail preserved, every sensation intact, as if the brain, recognizing the significance of what it was receiving, allocated its highest grade storage to the task and locked the file against any future modification. His words, as they have been relayed to me by someone who heard them. He turned away from the camera. Just for a moment. And I saw his real face. Not Bruce Lee the star. Not Bruce Lee the fighter. Just a man. In pain. Hiding it from everyone. And I thought, how long has he been hiding it? How many takes? How many days? How many years has this man been in pain and choosing to be perfect anyway? That's the thing people don't understand about Bruce Lee. They think he was superhuman. They think it was easy for him. They didn't see the 1.5 seconds. They didn't see what it cost. I've spent 18 months investigating Bruce Lee. Not the legend. The man. I found a 350-pound bodyguard who reached for a small man's shoulder and learned, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, what speed actually means. I found a Hollywood star who thought he understood the world and then watched a 135-pound man rearrange his understanding in an afternoon. I found a karate black belt who carried the weight of a single word is stop for the rest of his professional life. I found a hospital room where 3 doctors looked at a set of medical results and were wrong about what they meant, because the body they were examining had been engineered past the point where normal medicine applied. I found the greatest boxer alive, sitting in a dark room, watching a television screen, and seeing something that made him, Muhammad Ali, the most confident human being on the planet, go quiet. I found a fighter with no name who walked into a training space and handed Bruce Lee the only problem he couldn't immediately solve, and I found what Bruce built from that failure, which was more impressive than anything he'd built from his successes. I found a 300-pound wrestler who laughed when he saw the size of his opponent, and who stopped laughing 8 seconds later, and who didn't talk about those 8 seconds for 20 years. I found a fight that probably never happened, and instead of pretending it did, I asked why we need it to be true, and the answer told me more about us than it told me about Bruce. I found 70 million people who watched a man do something on television that their eyes couldn't track and their brains couldn't process, and who filled the gap between what they saw and what they understood with the only word that fit: magic. And I found the man himself, backstage, writing in his notebook about the geometry and the fencing theory and the angular footwork, and wishing someone would ask him how instead of just saying wow. And I found a stuntman. A man with no fame, no legacy, no place in the Bruce Lee mythology. A man who was standing 3 feet away on the wrong day, at the wrong angle, and who saw 1.5 seconds of truth that the cameras missed and the legend never absorbed. 10 stories. 10 different people. 10 different encounters with the same 135-pound man. And the thing that connects all of them, every single one, is not speed. It's not power. It's not technique. It's not the 1-inch punch or the 3-frame strike or the ability to put 300 pounds on the floor in 8 seconds. It's the gap. The gap between what Bruce Lee looked like and what Bruce Lee was. The gap between 135 pounds and the force that came out of those 135 pounds. The gap between a small Asian man in 1960s America and the revolution he represented. The gap between public perfection and private pain. The gap between a legend and a man. Every person in these 10 stories walked into that gap expecting one thing and finding another. The bodyguard expected a victim. The movie star expected a curiosity. The karate champion expected a fraud. The doctors expected a patient whose numbers made sense. Ali expected entertainment. The nameless fighter expected a readable opponent. The wrestler expected a joke. Seagal expected validation. The television audience expected a novelty act. And the stuntman expected one more normal day on set. All of them were wrong. Every single one. Bruce Lee lived in that gap. He was the gap. The distance between what people saw when they looked at him and what was actually there, the distance was where Bruce existed. That was his superpower. Not speed, not power, not technique. Surprise. The eternal, inexhaustible, 50 years and still ongoing surprise of being more than anyone expected. But the gap works in both directions. It always does. The same gap that made Bruce extraordinary also hid him. It hid his pain. It hid his vulnerability. It hid the headaches and the weight loss and the hand pressing against the temple every 2.5 minutes and the 1.5 seconds of unguarded face that only one person saw. The gap between legend and man is not just where Bruce's power lived. It's where his suffering hid. And in the end, the gap that made him a god is the same gap that kept anyone from seeing that the god was dying. The legend said, he is more than human. The truth said, he is exactly human. And exactly human means mortal. And mortal means an ending. And the ending, when it came, was not cinematic. It was not a final battle. It was not a blaze of glory. It was a headache, and a pill, and a nap that didn't end. It was the most ordinary thing in the world, a body that stopped happening to the most extraordinary person in the world. And the gap between ordinary death and extraordinary life is the final gap, the one that none of us can close, the one that Bruce, for all his engineering and all his discipline and all his will, could not find a way across. He's been dead for 50 years. And he's still surprising people. Still living in the gap between what they expect and what they find. Still 135 pounds of something that the world hasn't finished understanding. Every year, new students discover him. Every year, someone watches the footage for the first time and asks the same question that 70 million Americans asked in the late 1960s: how did he do that? And every year, the answer is the same. Not magic. Not mystery. Not the exotic supernatural powers of a mythological figure. Work. Study. Geometry. Fencing theory. Neuroscience. 15 years of effort so intense that it compressed a human body into something that operated in the spaces between other people's perceptions. He was not superhuman. He was the most human person I've ever investigated. And the distance between those two things, between superhuman and most human, is the same distance that has lived at the center of every story I've told on this channel. The gap. The same gap that the bodyguard fell into. The same gap that the wrestler couldn't climb out of. The same gap that 70 million television viewers couldn't see across. The same gap that hid 1.5 seconds of pain on a film set in Hong Kong, 6 days before the end. I started this investigation looking for the legend. What I found was a man. A man who worked harder than anyone, who understood the human body better than anyone, who moved faster than cameras could capture, who read opponents the way other people read books, who refused to accept the limitations that his size, his ethnicity, his era, and eventually his own body tried to impose on him. A man who showed the world what he could do and then watched the world decide that what he could do wasn't enough to overcome what he looked like. A man who left one country for another and found, in the second country, the thing the first country wouldn't give him. A man who became a god and then, because he was not a god, because he was exactly and only and magnificently human, died at 32 in a way that the legend still hasn't fully absorbed, because legends don't die of headaches, legends don't die in their sleep, legends don't die of the ordinary failures of ordinary biology. But Bruce Lee wasn't a legend. Bruce Lee was a man who generated a legend through the force of his work and his will, and the legend survived him, and the legend is still here, and the man is not, and the distance between the legend that's still here and the man who isn't is the last gap. The one that matters most. The one that this entire investigation has been, in its own way, trying to close. I haven't closed it. I don't think it can be closed. I think the gap is permanent, and I think that's okay. I think the gap is where the meaning lives. Not in the legend, which is clean and satisfying and complete. Not in the man, who was messy and mortal and in pain. In the space between them. In the distance between what people saw and what was actually there. In the 1.5 seconds between the mask and the face. In the 8 seconds between standing and falling. In the 3 frames between stillness and contact. In the 10 days between possibility and proof. In the 50 years between a death and an understanding. The gap. Bruce Lee's home. Bruce Lee's invention. Bruce Lee's gift. 1.5 seconds. That's all the stuntman saw. 1.5 seconds of a man's real face, in a lifetime of performance, on a film set in Hong Kong, 6 days before the end. It was enough. It was enough to see everything. This is not the end of the investigation. This is the end of the beginning.